Okay, everybody, good evening. And thank you for joining us for the Advocacy and Research Forum of Men Having Babies San Francisco 2020. Indeed, we were here last, over 2 years ago in 2020. That was our last pre-COVID conference. And incidentally, almost exactly a year ago, was our last virtual event, also titled our West Coast virtual event, although of course those, other than time zone, have a way of attracting people from all over. So a couple words about what this ARF is. So we call it the Advocacy and Research Forum. The inspiration for our forum came from a forum that took place almost 4 years ago, I think, at Cambridge, organized by the Department of Family Law in Cambridge, England. And they brought a group together of researchers, practitioners, mostly lawyers and others, that are dealing with surrogacy from mostly United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and elsewhere. It was a pretty international group. And the idea was to discuss about the state of legislation and research about surrogacy. And it was such a great, inspirational and influential event that we realized that we already have the capacity, because almost everybody there, it was a little bit of a reunion of Men Having Babies conferences. So the professionals that were there were the people who tend to come to a lot of our conferences anyhow. And we realized that a lot of the conversations, of course, were conversations that should and could continue as we discover new things, as new research comes out, and specifically since there's no way you can have that conversation in just even 1 week, and regardless of how thorough and terrific the group was. So what we did is we said, since our conferences are really, notwithstanding the use of the word conference, our conferences are really almost like a crash course in surrogacy. They're not an event that creates or discusses new knowledge each time. It's just a way to have a new group of people come and learn how to become parents, whether they want to become parents, whether surrogacy is the right solution for them, etc. So we said, why don't we start an evening before and get an opportunity to create this kind of discourse. So it involves issues pertaining to surrogacy and LGBT parenting, research, as I mentioned, advocacy issues, topics many times that are vary from one destination to the other based on the either particular interest or the context of that location, or sometimes just because there's a topic that we feel is more timely and it's a high time to talk about it. So last year we've had one of these advocacy forums that was dedicated to what we call fertility equality, and luckily, a lot more people are starting to call it that way. And that is now an umbrella for a lot of advocacy efforts, mostly focusing on the initiative to redefine infertility from something that is just a disease or a condition to also something that encompasses a status. And there is now a new model act that National Center for Disability Rights, NCLR, MHB, and Resolve developed together that is already the law in Illinois and hopefully very soon here in California. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow. So IVF now is something that same-sex couples in Illinois can get for free at par with heterosexual couples that are defined as infertile. And as I said, soon, hopefully, is here as well. So there are other initiatives, such as an initiative to amend the IRS code such that people can write off surrogacy-related medical fees. And that is also an ongoing process right now. A coalition of LGBT and other, including Resolve, other associations that got together, and there's a bill in Congress that's going to be introduced very soon for that. So this is an example of one topic that we take and we run with, and we want to bring up to higher awareness. Today, what we want to talk about is the issue of the balancing act and the tension that is involved in the fact that not-for-profits in general tend to work, especially in this country, a lot with industry interests and industry representatives. And in particular, in the infertility and surrogacy field, given that the IPs that we advocate for and that we feel that we represent need to have the assistance of a professional community, then this is, as far as we're concerned, a necessity, but nevertheless a necessity that could carry inherent dangers or inherent, as I mentioned, tension. So what we want to talk about is the fact that given that we are a not-for-profit organization, we want to discuss what we're doing in order to try to resolve that tension. And it's not just a matter of resolving that tension, it's also a matter of having a better, more productive collaboration between professional industry elements and the intended parents community, which is what we represent, but potentially communities such as egg donors and others in the field. So what we want to start by doing is talk about potential different solutions or potential different positions that organizations take sometimes regarding who they're taking money from and what measures they need to adapt so that they are able to do that without compromising their mission. And we were supposed to have people here also from Resolve and/or our family coalition. So when the time comes, I will just mention in principle what that model usually entails. But I want to start by inviting Kathleen, and sorry for that, I'm having, I have my cheat sheet here. So Kathleen Rickerson is a known egg donor who sits on the leadership team of We Are Egg Donors. So I'm actually going to do this now, sorry, and switch. I'm also there we go. Success. And so We Are Egg Donors is a donor advocacy and support group representing more than 2,000 current and past egg donors over 12 countries, or more than 12 countries. They partner with doctors, donors, and researchers to help support transparency and safety in the egg donor industry. Outside of We Are Egg Donors, Kathleen is the Director of Human Resources and Operations for a real estate company in Denver, Colorado. So thank you for making the trip, Kathleen. We're going to switch positions here. I'm going to let Kathleen take the opportunity to also just let you know more about the organization. Some of you might not know much about them or that they even existed. So this is also something expressly part of the mission of our Advocacy and Research Forum to introduce people to more organizations, more researchers, et cetera, in the field. So this is part of what we'd like to do. Thank you.
Hi. First, I want to take some time just to say thank you for including egg donor voices in this forum. As he said, I'm Kathleen Rickerson. I am an egg donor. I also sit on the leadership team for We Are Egg Donors, which is a global community and advocacy platform for egg donors. And as he said, we do have over 2,000 members in our group. They are either currently donating or they are past proven donors. And we represent over 12 countries. We're deeply passionate about contributing to the growing transparency of the egg donor experience, and I want to acknowledge how much it means to see your interest in the topic. The fact that you're here today to hear about assisted reproductive technology from their perspective of egg donors is fantastic. We're often asked by IPs and people who care about donor health, how can we advocate for egg donors, and what are the key issues that are important? So that's what we're going to talk about just a little bit. So before we dive in, there we go. Just a quick overview of our organization. As I said, we have over 2,000 egg donors. We were started back in 2013, almost 10 years ago. Our 3 leaders listed here, they met on the internet and quickly found that they had hour-long Google Hangout calls to unpack their egg donor experiences because there was a lot to unpack. Anyone who's familiar with egg donation knows how involved it is. There's a medical commitment that spans over months, and it's a carousel of appointments with medical professionals, blood draws, ultrasounds, daily self-administered injections, and a surgical procedure to remove the eggs, post-op care, and then in the days, months, and years that follow, curiosity around the donor-conceived children. One of our founders was in a fertility clinic lobby, and she found on the coffee table a pamphlet that said egg donor support and picked it up, but found that it was focused on the recipients, not the egg donors. And that was like everything else that was currently available at the time. There was plenty of resources donated to sourcing donor eggs, but not to the actual egg donors. So they had an idea to form the community where egg donors can support one another and bring advocacy to the industry of egg donation. So We Are Egg Donors was born about 10 years later based on this premise, and now we have over 2,000 members. We have formed international partnerships with researchers, academics, nonprofits, filmmakers, attorneys, and top-tier media outlets to contribute to the growing transparency and understanding of the egg donor concerns and diverse experiences. We do believe that there is no one-size-fits-all story for egg donors. We're a non-directive space, and we have shared countless stories. Because we have members in multiple countries, we see how differently things are practiced across the globe. Some countries ban donor eggs, others regulate it, and in the United States, it's a highly commercial environment. I do want to add that one of the ways that this transparency is possible and why our global community is unique is our personal donation process. Since day one, we have upheld a donation policy in which we do not accept donation, sponsorship, or endorsements from any business that profits from donor eggs. This includes fertility clinics, agencies, and egg banks. It's why we're all volunteer run on our leadership team. We do recognize the importance of having dedicated and non-directive resource for egg donors that is 100% for the donors, regardless of their decision to donate. We believe our donation policy is necessary to cultivate a non-directive and supportive space fully dedicated to the needs of egg donors. Our policy not only helps prevent conflicts of interest, but it allows us to continue growing our resources for donors with integrity, honesty, and transparency. So getting a little bit more into my own donation story, as I said, I was a known donor. I donated to one of my best friends that I grew up with in high school. Her and her husband, after several years of trying, were told that they had unexplained fertility on both sides. And they were able to, in Illinois, actually, once they had insurance coverage, and it was covered for them to have 4 rounds of IVF total. They went through 3 after paying for 5 IUIs. And then the third one, they had no viable eggs and no viable sperm, and were told that it was the end of the road for them and they needed to look into different ways to make their family. And when I heard that, I knew that I was supposed to donate to them. So I sent Sarah a text one morning that said, "This is going to sound crazy, but if you want me to donate my eggs to you, I would be honored to do that." And then about 6 months later, we made an embryo. So it went really well. The sperm donor is Sarah's brother. So he and his fiance will hopefully be able to use the same embryos. We do have some extras, and it was written specifically in the contract that they're going to be able to use that. So hopefully he and his husband, when the time comes, will be able to build their family in that way. So it's really neat that I get to play multiple parts with them. Being an egg donor gave me an inside scoop of to what egg donors are dealing with. There is not a lot of research for egg donors and the health on what we experience with it, and there's also not a lot on the donor experience that's being researched. I was very lucky because I had the support of the IPs because it was a known donation. I stayed with them throughout the course of the donation, and Sarah was able to attend every doctor's appointment and every ultrasound and every blood draw and be there the day of the donation, so they were in a very active part, but that's not always the case. And in the We Are Egg Donors group, we have learned that some have no support. So we're trying to get that to be fixed on that one. And then I just am a proud little auntie. So these are a few pictures. You can see the top, that's one of his first little photos. On the bottom in the middle, you can see me looking like I'm pregnant. That was just me a few days before the retrieval. Because I do not personally have fertility issues, I responded quite well to the fertility drugs and looked quite pregnant. So it was good. I started in Minnesota where I lived at the time. Sarah was in Illinois, so I started with a clinic that was in Minnesota with monitoring and then went down for 2 weeks to be in Illinois. And then this is our little miracle Ethan. So Mom and Dad are very, very proud of him. I like to say that he has my eyes and appetite, but everything else comes from them. Because he does have my eyes and he does have my appetite, but it's a really good time. So that's little Ethan. So I personally had no hesitations about donating, but there are a lot of unknowns for egg donors that cannot be overlooked. And for this reason, research is a core area of focus for We Are Egg Donors, and we support the research for egg donor health. Since the first donor egg was reported nearly 40 years ago, the fertility industry has failed to conduct the research necessary to support their claim that egg donation carries minimal risks. There has not been a lot of long-term studies on egg donors. This is something that the ASRM states in its guidance on repetitive egg donations. And so often if our members start to face health issues, clinics will send them away because there's no central tracking for egg donors. We do believe that people are perfectly capable of making informed decisions, but informed choice is not always possible if there isn't a lot of data. So pictured here, we have Dr. Diane Tober. She's a medical anthropologist who has studied donors for more than 30 years, and in 2013, our co-founder Raquel reached out to her about the opportunity to partner and study egg donor health outcomes. Since then, We Are Egg Donors is proud to be a longtime partner with Dr. Diane Tober. Here's just a few highlights, and again, this works directly with egg donors, not necessarily specific to donors who are moving on to surrogacy, so traditional surrogates or gestational characters. It's for egg donors across the board. So with her research, which spans 300 egg donor interviews and 700 surveys, it was funded in part by the National Science Foundation, found that financial need is a major contributor as to why egg donors choose to donate. So most participants in her study were in their early to mid-20s at first donation, some as young as 18, and most donated eggs out of financial need with more than half at the income level below or slightly above federal poverty level, and also accompanied by student loan debt. There is no enforceable limit on how many cycles egg donors undergo in the United States, so there's currently ASRM guidelines and recommendations of no more than 6 cycles due to potential risks for egg donors and lack of following through with families, tracking the connection to families. Many egg donors reported that they did go from 7 to 19 different cycles, so that far exceeds those guidelines. So clearly the guidelines are just guidelines. They're not quite enough when they're being ignored. Egg donors often produce far more eggs than we're told to expect. So the Institute of Medical Reporting suggests that a cycle should be canceled when someone produces more than 20 eggs. Yet in these studies, donors frequently reported 30 and as high as 83 eggs per cycle, which directly affects the number of children that can be born per donor. With that, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is not rated correctly for egg donors versus those who are going through fertility treatment. So OHSS occurs when the ovaries swell and leak fluid into the body. They can go from the size of walnuts to grapefruits. As you saw in that picture, they get really big. This is a life-threatening condition that requires hospitalization in several cases. So egg donors are told that this condition is rare, but it's not with donors. One study discovered that more than 10% of donors get severe OHSS. And this, again, is difficult to track when not tracking with egg donors, because if you think of the medication that you're being given, IVF medication is typically given to someone who doesn't have the ability to produce an egg each month on their own. But when you're giving the same fertility treatment to somebody who does produce eggs every month on their own, it kind of goes a little haywire sometimes. So increased risk to the donor with OHSS. They're 35% more likely to have it in further donations that they have. So if you have it once, you're 35% more likely to continue to have that. Most egg donors support open identity donations. So 63% of donors prefer open identity options from the outset of the donation. 20% were undecided and only 17% preferred anonymity, which is something that truly is just no longer possible. Over half of the donors surveyed expressed the desire to meet someone born from their eggs, and 20% had attempted to find them through ancestry testing and other means. And this brings me to how you all can join us in advocating for better standards. So here are 3 ways. The first is intersectional advocacy. We believe that assisted reproductive technology is a human right. Several We Are Egg donor leaders identify as queer, and everyday LGBTQI+ rely on third-party donor conception to grow their families. We believe that advocating for the right to grow your family goes hand in hand with advocating for all the parties involved, including the egg donors, gestational surrogates, and sperm donors. If you believe the same, we hope you will join us in driving for more transparent discussion on the impact of commercial egg donation, which can often make an egg donor feel more like an egg vendor than an actual patient. Everyone deserves to be treated like an equal patient, and we can't afford to keep shrouding egg donation by depicting egg donors as doe-eyed altruistic angels, but actually be able to take care of them and do the research. Next, anonymity is impossible. So DNA testing kits, as we all know, are available on Amazon. So anonymity basically no longer exists. Donor-conceived individuals are genetically networked with donor-conceived siblings. So egg donors find that clinics and agencies push anonymous egg donations as the standard, but this practice needs to catch up with the reality that technology has made enduring anonymity impossible. The rising number of donor-conceived individuals are speaking out about their concerns and rights around accessing their own medical history and donor health information. So we support the rights to donor-conceived people having access to their medical history, genetic history, and family history. We also want a direct line of communication, so we encourage always having that line of communication with an egg donor as you go through the process. Make an introduction and voice your availability to ensure that her standards of care are always being met and that you're on her team, as she is on yours. Don't underestimate the power of your voice as an intended parent. And finally, we also recommend that you avoid donor egg sharing programs. It's a cost-saving way that can sometimes just boost the eggs a little too much. It puts the donor at an increased risk of producing too many eggs. So that brings us to the end. Again, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I said, once you donate your eggs to someone and they are part of the process and in the room with you when you go through the ultrasound, if you've ever gone through an egg donation process, you understand exactly what's happening in that room. So there's really nothing off limits when it comes to this with me. So feel free to ask anything. I'm an open book. Our contact information is here. We'd love to stay in touch, and let me know if you have any questions.
I think we can take a couple of questions now, although, I mean, we'll continue with the flow in a minute, but since this is a very interesting and unique introduction to an organization, if you have even off-topic questions, we'll take them now.
I have one question, and it's more about the ovarian...
Hyperstimulation? Mm-hmm.
Right, so my question on that is how many actually, it's like life-threatening, do women actually pass away from it? What percentage?
I don't know the actual percentage of that. It can be life-threatening. The biggest risk for that can be like ovarian torsion, which is where basically your ovary is going to twist on itself, and that typically ends in a removal of the ovary. But it can cause internal bleeding. It can cause a lot of damage. It can cause you to go septic. If that happens, then the tube can get tied off, like think of like a hose. When you squeeze a hose, that's what can happen with the tube, which can cause a lot of other damage. So I don't know the actual percentage of what the life-threatening or if there have been deaths, and I don't want to speak out of turn on that, but.
The second part of that is, are they able to have kids of their own if they choose to do that after they go through that?
If somebody has an ovary removed, like if that's kind of the end case of it, yes is the overall answer, because they still have one working ovary and all you need is one egg. So the body can also kind of overcompensate so that they can still be producing eggs each month, even with one ovary. But it can cause other damage and it can cause, other issues. It's not something that we want to happen, obviously. But no, it doesn't. It's not like a straight out the gate, if that happens, you are infertile yourself. That's not.
And we will have a medical panel, obviously, this weekend, and I encourage you to think of some of these questions. The doctors on the panel will probably address it even unprompted, but to some extent. Yeah. Let me just say that it is very important to understand that, yes, egg donation and surrogacy are not without risk. And who are the women who are allowed to, it's okay to turn down some of these women. They have to be turned down. The reason it is ethical in our mind is because there are proven techniques to make it safer. And the reason we need research is because we want to have this feedback loop to know whether those recommendations are really adhered to. So I'll start by saying that there are larger overlaps between various organizations, such as We Are Egg Donors, as well as Men Having Babies. There's a U.S. Donor Conceived Council. So that's an association of the people who were conceived through egg donation. Of course, none of these organizations represent 100% the perspectives of all the people that are part of these categories, but we need those different perspectives, and we don't always have the same perspective at all. For instance, the Donor Conceived Council is promoting very aggressively just known egg donation, which we think is something that should be encouraged, but not necessarily legislated as a mandatory requirement. Indeed, there's people who need the help of egg donors from countries where if your egg donor is known, she'll be the person who's their legal parent. So there are definitely a lot of perspectives that are required. But let me say that, yes, research, the need to understand the perspectives of different parties and have the voices of different parties, those are all very, common commonalities between us and We Are Egg Donors. So I want to continue with our agenda and just say that other than the introduction to We Are Egg Donors, you know what, I'm just going to turn this, or can we just turn this off, the projector? Yeah. Sure. Because that's it, we're not doing any more presentations. That did it. So what we want to say is that there are organizations such as We Are Egg Donors and others who are advocacy organizations, and specifically are not in the position to encourage or to try to present options for people about which providers they should use. And when you, let's say, collaborate with NBC and PBS, whatever, it's not as if you're telling people, switch this channel, not the other. So you don't have any conflict of interest, certainly not in that regard. You would have conflict of interest if you represented the industry or got money from the industry and were researching or encouraging research that is not necessarily, that sheds light on things that the industry might not necessarily want to shed light on. And by the way, Dr. Tabor, was here 2 years ago at our advocacy and research forum in San Francisco, and it was very interesting to have her and to hear from her as well. So what we know is that there are also other organizations, and we'll get to Men Having Babies in a minute, that are more charity advocacy organizations, such as, let's say, the Human Rights Campaign, or many LGBT associations that get money from banks and the travel industry and entertainment industry, but they're not in a position to recommend whether you should use Citibank or Bank of America. They're not. You don't go to these marriage equality or whatever organizations for the purpose of finding out which bank to use. So getting money from that industry doesn't really represent any conflict of interest to them. And Family Equality Council, who's supposed to be here today, is one of those organizations. They get the support of the social responsibility budgets of these corporations, and that's terrific. Those corporations want and justifiably deserve the acknowledgement that they are giving to the community. But once again, our Family Coalition is not in a position to tell people which bank to use or which cruising line to use, or etc. So what makes Men Having Babies in a unique position is that we want to help men evaluate and choose, among other things, which professionals they'll use for their surrogacy, journey. Because it is not enough for people to just learn about surrogacy. In order for them to be able to go successfully through this project, they need to find reputable and ethical providers. And that is part of our mission. Yet we are, as if, in my previous example, as if Family Quality Council had a resource fair of which bank to use. So, of course, the bank that gives them more money, you would think, is the one that they'll probably recommend. So how do we avoid that predicament? How do we avoid this predicament that a lot of what we do depends, and our business model, so to speak, depends on having providers sponsor our conferences? That's the better part of our budget comes from sponsorships, from clinics, agencies, law firms, mental health professionals, and complementary services providers, as well as they give free services and huge discounts to our gay parenting assistance program that wouldn't exist without their generosity. So how could we continue with our main mission, which is to support intended parents? And certainly supporting intended parents would not be well served if we were to be always putting the interest of the providers ahead of theirs. So can organizations such as Men Having Babies exist and be successful even though there is such an inherent dilemma here? So we're going to move on, and Sherman, why don't we just you can speak from your. So I never introduced myself. I'm Ron Puldayan. I'm the executive director of Men Having Babies, and more importantly, the father of twins who are now 21 years old from surrogacy. So Sherman, why don't you introduce yourself, and we will hear from the chairman of our board about some of the things that we are, some of the arrangements, procedures that we put in place to try to deal with this dilemma.
Thanks, Ron. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the introduction. And Ron, I would have introduced you if we had not.
We're not that formal here.
Right. So my name is Sherman Taylor. I've been with Men Having Babies since 2016. I am a father of 2 children born through surrogacy and IVF. I actually live in Ohio. The organization was founded and based out of New York, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it for these past almost 6 years, which I can't believe. And I'm excited to talk to you tonight and then through the rest of the weekend, and being back in action here in our live face-to-face conferences. So it's wonderful to see the familiar faces here and see new faces. So Ron wanted me to talk a little bit about how, as a non-for-profit, how we remain unbiased. And it's critical for us to be unbiased in order for us to fulfill our mission. And our mission is somewhat threefold. So advocacy, which is part of the intent for tonight, advocacy for reform. We were active in the reform for New York surrogacy law, and active in other ways, as Ron mentioned, IRS tax benefits, which would help lower the cost of surrogacy and IVF for people. Right now, I believe I didn't think the decision went to the Supreme Court, but there was a court decision in, I think, 2016, 2017 that prohibited same-sex couples from reaping tax benefits. That's something that we would like to see changed. So anyway, part of our mission. A second part of our mission is providing unbiased information so that people can be informed as they're making decisions about how to proceed down their surrogacy journey. And a third part is lowering the cost for surrogacy so that more people can actually pursue it. And the reason why it's critical for our mission to be unbiased is because, as Ron was saying in the metaphor about banks, is we want individuals to make the best decision, and we don't want to be in a, I'll say, pay-for-play situation. We can't be, it's not ethical, which is a core part of our organization, to be purchased or to be directed by people who and guide people to certain organizations because someone is donating more money. That's not the intent of the organization. It's to bring folks together, the providers, the intended parents, the lawyers, the clinics, the egg donation agencies, the surrogacy agencies, so that there's a forum where people can interact and then choose based on what's going to work best for them. And we have many different protocols and procedures that are in place as an organization to maintain that kind of separation between ourselves and the many wonderful providers that we get to work with. For example, we have a board, of which I am a member of and the chairman of, and we have a staff. And one of the protocols and procedures that we have is about board and staff interactions with the providers. And so board members and staff of Men Having Babies aren't permitted to serve on industry organizations or other organizations that would be influenced or could influence the direction of Men Having Babies and therefore influence the direction for the IPs. For example, a member of the board was approached to join a recent organization, and while the opportunity was in the field of surrogacy and IVF, it was a conflict of interest for the board, and so the board member who was approached, declined in order to maintain kind of an unbiased position and not be influenced in the organization. Now, another separation that we have is we also have an advisory board of providers that provide and give us insight on information that's relevant to the organization so that we're always up to speed. That's about information and sort of guidance on where the industry is going, but it's not about providing direction to where the organization should go. So we gather the information, we interact with the advisory board that's from the industry, but in a way that's about securing insight and direction, not for procuring direction or driving the organization in a different space. So I wanted to just continue on with providing some examples of how we strive to keep ourselves separated. We've really worked hard to ensure that intended parents have the best guidance on what looks like ethical surrogacy so that they're informed and they're making choices based on what are the best principles. We've drafted our own guidance of ethics that we've then used or leveraged and provided to other organizations so that they have a basis. So Men Having Babies had their own, and the name is totally escaping me.
Ethical framework.
Thank you, ethical framework for surrogacy compensation. That was a basis for discussion among the SEEDS organization. So we can provide the information to SEEDS, but we don't sit on the board of SEEDS. So it's about information exchange and not about influence.
For those who don't know, SEEDS is the Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy, but it's really the de facto trade association of agencies. So that would, and Sam's going to talk about that in a few minutes. So just
thanks.
providing the definition.
So that's another example where, would it make sense potentially to have folks from Men Having Babies sitting on the board of SEEDS or embedded in the organization? Potentially, because there's good knowledge there, but again, striving to remain unbiased, we've said no, we can't actively participate, we won't have positions or hold positions of authority because that's not consistent with the intent of the organization. Another aspect of the Men Having Babies organization, so we have an advisory board, we have a board, we have staff, we actually have a legal advisory committee as well, which allowed us to bring in more legal insight because the laws vary by state and they vary by country. And since we're about providing and securing the best information for the organization, we wanted to have another opportunity to bring in good, important, and critical information about how to conduct surrogacy journeys in a legal and ethical way throughout the world and throughout the U.S. And we've created this additional forum for us to have that kind of influence and have that kind of insight brought to us. And we understand that because of the nature of our advisory board, which is coming from industry as well, that it was very unlikely that an attorney that was not running an agency would be able to participate in the advisory board. So we have now a different forum that allows us to, have more voices, certainly more legal voices that are not necessarily running an agency, to serve in a way to the organization that gets us a better understanding of what the legal footprint in the world. So those are several examples of how we've structured ourselves so that we're trying to maintain a very unbiased, ethical nature in our organization so that everyone's getting the best information and that people don't feel like there's an option to influence the organization that would be directly beneficial to one party or another.
Thank you. And just to understand, we're talking about very, very concrete things. The board of Men Having Babies can fire me. And can you just imagine if Sam could fire me? If the advisory board had the authority to hire or fire or set the compensation of Men Having Babies staff. So the distinction between a board that is intended parents and other people that are no longer in the industry, which is what we have, including surrogates at times, and an advisory board that only provides a perspective that we need that perspective, but does not have the authority, the fiduciary responsibility, and we're not accountable to. So the staff of Men Having Babies is not accountable to our advisory board. However, our board is not in a position to give us the full breadth of input that we need to make decisions that the advisory board and the legal committee, and we have the chairperson of our legal committee, Amir Hazenbush, here. So we don't, that's one mechanism that we created. So I'd like to ask Sarah Miller, our Director of Business Development, and her role is to get money from the industry, to talk about some of the other procedures we have in place, to try our best, because I'm not pretending for 1 minute that it is possible to strike a perfect balance and a perfect sterile, airtight system here, but we still are doing our best, and Sarah will talk about some of those procedures as well.
Yeah, so as you heard from Kathleen, they very intentionally do not take money from the industry, right? So we are walking this kind of tightrope of, in order to do what we do and to continue to have a voice in advocacy and to provide education and financial assistance, we do need to have income and revenue from the industry. How do we do that, though, in a way that those funds don't change the fact that at heart, we are looking out for the intended parents is by having very structured sponsorship programs in place where it is very clear for our sponsors the benefits that they get at a certain sponsorship level, and those don't vary. If you come in at a certain sponsorship level, everybody who's at that level is going to get the same benefits. There's no preferential treatment between one, say, gold sponsor or another gold sponsor. We have, if you've been to a conference in the past, we have many plenary sessions, and during those sessions, we have speakers who are experts on the specific a specific topic that we're addressing. And so our process for bringing in those speakers is very structured. We have, at the beginning of our conference year, when we outline the conferences we're going to do for the following year, we ask our providers to submit speaker nominations. They can nominate themselves. They can nominate other colleagues in the industry. They can tell us where their area of expertise is and where they think they are best suited to speak on a panel. And then we take that to the board, and we go through a process whereby our intent, because again, who we are looking out for is our intended parents. We need people who are knowledgeable and informed, have longevity in the industry to speak on those panels. And so conference sponsorship, where you're paying us to be a sponsor at a conference, to speak on a panel is not something that you can pay for. All of our panelists have to have the right knowledge base. They have to be educated. And so it's not tied to that sponsorship level that you come in at. And it's not intended that our panel speakers have, a better conference sponsorship experience. That said, as we addressed, it's this balancing act, right? And so if we have multiple people who are equally qualified to speak on a particular panel, they have the same knowledge base, the same expertise, and one of them is sponsoring a conference and the other one is not, yes, we are going to end up having the conference sponsor who's going to be on that panel, but that's only when everything else is equal. And so our goal really, truly is to make sure that we are providing informed, transparent information at our conferences while at the same time providing an opportunity for the industry to come and present themselves. You can't sponsor a conference without adhering to our ethical framework that Sherman spoke about. And so we're trying to find this balancing act. And I'm constantly talking to our providers about the fact that we are a not-for-profit. And so, yes, you're getting benefits for sponsoring, but there's no preferential treatment. And we really, truly, at the end of the day, we're looking out for our intended parents, our future intended parents, and also their egg donors and their surrogates that are working with them to make sure that the work we're doing is ethical and done the right way.
Wonderful. And really, structure is the first thing, and procedure is the first thing you want to bring when you try to stay unbiased. And discretion is always, a problem. So the more discretion you have, the more likely you are to not even know yourself whether you're being swayed one way or the other. So having rules, we have sometimes speakers who are chosen. We had that in this particular conference. And that speaker can come. So to say, my second in command in my company will speak instead. And we were just in the position to say to somebody like that, who's a very long time sponsor, say, no, we chose you as a speaker. We didn't choose your company to speak. And we brought somebody else to speak. And we choose we nominate to our advisory board individuals who are also part of a company that has obviously some benefits coming from that. But in another example, once again, not naming the people, a very well-known and long-time provider, professional that is on our advisory board said, "I'm too busy. Here's a new person in my clinic," as it turned out. Let her be on the advisory board instead of me. I just don't have the time. And we said no. So sometimes this creates friction, but what helps us, and hopefully this will help too, is to remind people that we're a not-for-profit organization. And if we weren't, we wouldn't be in a position to do things that the industry can't do, such as advocate for the change of the IRS tax code. Companies are much more limited in their ability to exert pressure and to lead legislation. Community organizations are much better positioned to do that. So, of course, we have a lot of shared interest. And on that, I want to move on to Sam Hyde, who's the president of Circle Surrogacy, but also a board member, the treasurer at least, an officer at SEEDS, as I mentioned, the Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy. So first of all, they don't have the same challenges we do because they're not really a charitable organization. They're more of a trade association. But we have collaborated with you, and we are collaborating on certain projects. And for instance, you invited Lisa from our staff to sit as an observer in your standards committee. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you do, what SEEDS does, to the extent that some people don't know, and about how you see this kind of collaboration between the representatives, in this case, of the industry and a community organization like ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ron, for having me up here. So SEEDS is the Society for Ethical Egg Donation and Surrogacy. It was founded many years ago with the pursuit of injecting a real ethical framework into surrogacy and egg donation. Unlike an IVF clinic where you have to be a doctor to do procedures, you don't actually need to have any credentials to start your own agency. And so what the mission behind SEEDS is to make sure that agency owners and professionals within the field have access to educational resources and frameworks to make sure that they're providing this service with the best interest of the intended parents and the surrogates and the donors, first and foremost. And so SEEDS has been around for a long time, and one of the recent initiatives that has really been pushed forward by SEEDS is this formal standard setting initiative. So what are the standards that are going to guide us as an organization? Really an effort to put a stake in the sand and make sure that the SEEDS standard seal of approval for agencies is something people want to strive for, that they want to follow standards, they want to have access to the educational resources that SEEDS puts forward. And a lot of the people that participate in SEEDS and are on the board of SEEDS and are officers of SEEDS and participants in the annual conference are similar overlap with men having babies. And so a lot of us have had a lot of experience working with men having babies through the years at various conferences and events, and have been able to see the ethical framework that men having babies brings forward to these. To the pursuit of doing this, quote, the right way, unquote. And I think Men Having Babies provides a really important role within our community, right? This is a very complex journey. It's a very emotional journey. It can sometimes be a very long journey. And so we want to make sure people are making an informed choice on their path forward. That's a goal of SEEDS. It's a goal of Men Having Babies. And what's nice about Men Having Babies is it provides a really natural nexus for parents and agencies to come together and meet in a couple-day forum and give parents access to an incredible amount of agencies in a short amount of time, kind of like speed dating, right, for lack of a better word. And that's a really important venue for parents at the beginning of their journey to start to get a sense for what the hell am I doing? How is this going to work, right, for lack of a better word. And so for SEEDS, when we went to say, we're going to start setting these standards, we set up a standards committee comprised of a couple lawyers that have been a long-time participant in the space, a couple agencies that have been long-time agency owners in the space, representing both small agencies and large agencies. And we also wanted to bring in additional voices within the community. And so Men Having Babies was a perfect example of someone that we could bring in to provide guidance in that way, because Men Having Babies has logged a lot of miles with a lot of these providers. But Men Having Babies also provides an incredibly important charitable arm through their Gay Parents Assistance Program, Stage 1 and Stage 2 journeys, which is either a discount on your journey or a pro bono journey. And so not only have Men Having Babies had a chance to see agencies at the beginning of their journey talking to parents and providing guidance at the very, very start, but they've had a chance to see those agencies deliver the service over the course of many years through these advocacy or discount programs that are provided. And so if we thought about how are we going to provide standards that can guide all of the agencies, having a partner that has worked across all of the agencies, not only in a conference setting, but also in a journey delivery setting, was a really natural extension for that. And so Leisha Schuster, who I don't know if she's here in the crowd or not tonight, but was an extremely active participant on our standards committee. Not necessarily making decisions one way or the other, but playing a really important role of the devil's advocate in some cases, or saying, we've seen these types of scenarios play out, in agencies that maybe the standards committee themselves weren't as familiar with, and it really helped us make informed choices about, is this standard that we're thinking about going to be applicable to enough agencies, and is it going to be actually what is right for parents, what is right for surrogates, and what is right for donors, and obviously what is right for the eventual child born through the process. And so it was an incredibly important role, and the organization put in a lot of work. I mean, the document that you guys brought to the table was really, really impressive, and really a lot of nuanced thought around how can we bring these standards forward? And I think it helped, for us as a committee, cut through maybe some of our own biases that we had, right? Because we were a committee of 5 people or 6 people that obviously we all brought our own kind of baggage and our own nuanced view on how we wanted things to be done. And so having, an additional voice in the room that wasn't a direct benefit of the standards in some way was critically important to us.
And Lisa, of course, is also a 2-time surrogate herself,
Right.
So that was an important perspective. And just to make this a little more real, for instance, we have been doing a lot of thinking about the issue of compensation for surrogates and egg donors, and what is this compensation for? And to kind of give you almost like a visual of how these channels of perspectives and of experiences flow here, the reason we got into this deeper and what informed our reflections and our work on the issue, for instance, of compensation, is the fact that we're exposed very much to people from around the world. So our ethical framework grew really a lot from our interaction with intended parents and with LGBT associations in Europe and in Israel and later in Asia, where perspectives and where the legislative and the ethical context is very different. And understanding this, in my mind, is always like, the analogy I have is like this really complex, multi-dimensional sculpture in the dark, and you have rays of light, shining on it from different angles. And that's the only way to really understand what is this entity. And having those different perspectives, different rays of light shining here is the only way to understand some of those things. And it was challenging for us in Europe to have a situation where we were really attacked, sometimes even almost physically, certainly verbally, by anti-surrogacy elements. And having then to articulate to ourselves, why is it okay to pay a surrogate? Does that make her somebody that worked for us? Does that make her, somebody we're exploiting? Then we said, no, she's not just doing something nice for us. She has a lot of discomfort, a lot of disruption to her life, and she's undertaking risk. The same for egg donors. We're not comfortable with the commodifying of egg donation through, this process of going to a store and buying eggs, because we think it's the same thing. Egg donors go through, also very considerable discomfort. They also disrupt their lives, not to the extent, not as long as surrogates do, but they certainly also put their health in risk. So having needed to articulate that led us to ask for that language to be part of the New York bill, and it's the first time that a surrogacy regulating law had that language, because before it used to be either silent or services rendered. Surrogates were considered to be provided, and egg donors, compensation for services rendered. That hits us in the guts. That's not true. So, and that also made it to the SEED standards, as well as our work on the definition of infertility. So there's a lot of things. So you see how there's very symbiotic sharing of and exchanging of perspectives and work. We just put a lot of work into some things that we were able to share. So we don't have the luxury, Men Having Babies, to not have that kind of collaboration. But our conferences, but part of it is what Sarah said, is transparency. So at our conferences, even when we advertise for our conferences, we say we have different types of sessions: peer advice, expert advice, interaction with providers. The peer advice is when we talk about what we accumulated over the years, and that's our planning your surrogacy journey. Other things, those of you who are IPs will see tomorrow. And by the way, those of you who are IPs don't know that you're IPs, you're intended parents. So that's why. So if you were wondering, some of you, what IPs were, We'll define all these things in the morning tomorrow, but this is kind of like, like you're joining in the middle of a conversation. But so those who are IPs, now you know we're talking about you, because there's a mix here of people from the industry and people who are prospective parents and people that are parents. So, so we tell people, this is, our peer advice, and treat it as such. Now we're handing you over to experts, but those experts are also business owners. And now we're doing breakout sessions. Those breakout sessions are not, it used to be that our first approach was that the breakout sessions we do had topics. And that made it seem like the people speaking there were chosen because of these topics. And that's not true. The breakout sessions, the way we treat them here, and you'll see tomorrow, are basically kind of group speed dating. It's an opportunity to learn more about the providers. So transparency is very important. We say, they bought these breakout sessions. So it's about process transparency and not, but at the same time, accommodating those different things. So we don't have a lot of time, but I want to just mention one additional aspect of ongoing collaboration that's happening right now between Seeds and Men Having Babies. And I think it would also demonstrate why it is necessary, why it's not a luxury. And just to really emphasize, even before that, the Gay Parenting Assistance Program would not have been able to provide assistance to the tunes of more than $1 million worth of cash and free services, mostly free services, every year if it wasn't for this collaboration. So in many ways, as Sam also said slightly differently, we created a conduit to serve the industry, to help them channel their goodwill to our community. Okay, so they couldn't do it without us, but the goodwill is coming from them. And we, in the process, are trying to stay unbiased, even though they're not all showing the same amount of goodwill. But going back to what I was about to present, and that is something we call Surrogacy Advisor. And without getting into too much details, let me just say that at the end of the day, when these standards are going to be finalized, and I think it's any day now, they might be like the standards that ASRM finalized about safety for egg donors, which Kathleen showed before, are not always adhered to. So standards are good. They're a huge step forward to self-regulating. They're a huge step forward to prevent some of those horror stories that come out of the press every now and then, and believe me, are get thrown at us again and again, especially in Europe, by organizations literally called the Association for the Abolition of Surrogacy and others like them. So not only standards are a good step towards that, but those standards as such, if intended parents and surrogates and egg donors don't know about them, there's not going to be a lot of incentive for the bad apples. And the bad apples we're trying to prevent from not adhering by these standards. A lot of these standards are just an articulation of what the best practices of the established and ethical agencies, mostly in the field already. So why would they even bother adhering to these standards if the intended parents are not going to demand that? Are not going to say, are you abiding by them? So Men Having Babies intentionally asked to be part of the drafting of the standards so that we feel that we can endorse them. And unless there's some surprises at the last minute, we still do. And we're saying now, and Surrogacy Advisor will be the mechanism to do it. It's basically a directory, but also a mechanism to get all these providers to upload all the documents and the validation of all that they really are adhering to these standards. We're saying unless you do, you're not going to be part of our conferences. And unless you do, you're not going to be part of our assistance program. So all of a sudden, as opposed to just having a group of providers meeting and deciding on standards amongst themselves that they hope somebody will adhere to, and maybe they'll kick them out of Seeds if they even know that they're not. Now we're saying we're adding our, not just voice, we're going to prevent access to the community, which is bought by a lot of thousands of dollars by a lot of providers every year to come to these conferences, we're going to tell them you're not welcome if you're not adhering to these standards. So it'll be the first of, I hope, several other enforcement mechanisms for standards that will take them a step beyond a declaration of intentions or guidelines. And we're doing it together with Seeds, and you'll hear more about it in the months to come. But go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, I think that type of symbiotic relationship, Ron, can only really exist because of the fact that so many of the providers that are part of Seeds have had such a long history with men having babies and seen MHB act in a neutral, ethical way for many, many years, right? Seeds would have never agreed to do those sort of things had we not felt very strongly about the ethical framework that exists at men having babies. And that only comes through logging a lot of miles over many, many conferences and sitting on many, many panels and hearing that neutrality with that kind of unified goal of helping parents make an informed choice about their path forward, not necessarily pushing them on one path versus the other. And so I think that, the outcome was, the culmination of, a lot of agencies that are part of Seeds having trust in men having babies to be the right partner as we thought about how do we create a directory or create an effort that advances this goal of letting parents make an informed choice. So I just wanted to call that out.
Absolutely. And speaking of logging miles, in just a couple of months, we're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary. July of 2012 is when we incorporated. So we have been around for a while, and as did Seeds, but Seeds is great, growing significantly. So I know this is more or less the time we said we're going to finish, and we do have some drinks and hors d'oeuvres for you. And I do want to leave, since we started late, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. Is that okay with everybody to stay here for another few minutes? We started a little late. So if you have questions or comments, this is definitely the kind of forum we would like to keep as interactive. Before COVID, this forum actually continued throughout the weekend. We're kind of like gradually going back to our previous formats and also visiting them. So right now, this is it. So if you have questions, please, or comments, seriously, suggestions. Or if you're looking for a job and you want to be an advocacy associate or director at Men Having Babies, because we're looking for those positions for a long time now. So, and those of you watching us at home afterwards, if you want to be an advocacy director or associate, let us know. Okay, any questions? Comments? Compliments? Go ahead.
So I'm curious if that's the direction that you guys are kind of heading in. It just seems like that's a natural progression from.
So first of all, he's talking about Human Rights Campaign, not a clinic in the field known by the same acronyms. So no, that's not what Surrogacy Advisor is going to be. And in fact, that is another interesting, balancing act we had to strike. We don't want to be in a position to rate and recommend anybody in the industry, nor do we think that when it comes for surrogacy ethics, that somebody should be a 7, somebody should be a 10. We think that it should be all in the frame of threshold conditions, and either you're in or you're out. So so that's why Surrogacy Advisor is not going to rate people at how ethical they are, but rather Surrogacy Advisor is just going to display. It's going to be a directory. It's going to be it's going to be a way for people to feel assured about the people that are there, that are both professionally vetted as well as ethically committed and accountable based on a standard that is not a matter of not up for compromise. So that's why we're not doing it. But we also, I know, for instance, Family Equality Council tried to come up with some sort of a directory that says how gay friendly you are. We don't think that's useful. The service, it's very self-serving at the very least, but I feel also probably very genuine for all the providers in this field to be, gay-friendly, and I don't think that's something we need to give people, some sort of rating about, especially since HRC already does that. As far as policies, not as far as inclinations. So when it comes to surrogacy standards, I think probably SEEDS will agree with me. It's either you're adhering or not. But terrific question. Yes, Angela.
Yeah, so you had mentioned that you serve communities that don't allow for an egg donor to not be anonymous. And so because of that and because of protections of them, the idea that a non-anonymous egg donation being the forced idea is not something that they're having to get behind. And I'm just curious from the perspective of the overarching choice that most intended parents have to choose their egg donor from wherever they would like that egg donor to reside, why not take this stance, given all of the research out there that really third-party reproduction and the anonymity of an egg donor can hinge the happiness of the child, there are other things that could detrimentally affect them later on. Why not just advocate for your intended parents to only choose a donor in a community that an anonymous egg donation is not an issue for them?
I'm happy to hear other perspectives, but let me first say something that came to mind as you were asking this. First of all, a lot of ethical codes and best practices have a way of evolving. Once again, very few things are black and white. Have a way of evolving from guidelines, from recommendations, from, to the point where it is ripe to say now it's a standard and, you can't. So first of all, if anything, that element exists also in the sense that I feel that this is evolution. Many of you maybe for years have been in our conferences talking about the difference between anonymous and I get confused with all these negatives, non-anonymous, anonymous, known versus anonymous. So yes, there is. We feel a lot of body of evidence saying, and we feel from our own experience, I remember our kids went to an LGBT family camp once and came back and said, this and that kids are obsessed about asking who their egg donor is. And our kids know who their egg donor was. So they were telling me in real life, they were giving me an example of how that could become an issue. So we talk about those things. So the other thing that comes to mind is that sometimes until there's a standard, transparency and education is what you do. So right now, I think that's the stage we're at. But that sounds like a cop-out, so I'll tell you why we think also there's a problem. It's problematic, not just that we're waiting until the people can stomach this. As I mentioned, the legal issues are not that straightforward. So I feel that in an ideal world, the contract would be as if it is anonymous, but it won't really be an anonymous egg donation. And as I said, there are many, not many, there are some, and Amira, if you want to jump in, there are some cases where you need to keep the egg donor legally anonymous, because of where these parents are going to be from and the laws in their countries, etc. So saying categorically, like U.S. Donor Conceived Organization Council right now is trying to legislate, saying that you cannot have anonymous egg donation, we feel that not only is it not time yet, that not everybody's ready for it, that it's going to reduce the availability of egg donation, but we also feel that for some people, it's going to create a real legal problem.
Yeah, I understand. I just think that from the perspective of the fact that anonymous egg donation doesn't exist any longer, literally, it's something that we need to get people comfortable with sooner rather than later because the concept is literally invalid at this point.
Yeah, but it's another example of why.
The next step of how we will deal
Yeah.
with the ramifications of that psychologically and how we
Yeah.
make sure that that's an option for everyone.
Well noted.
As
Yeah.
I'm an adopted person who didn't have access to medical information. I'm an egg donor and surrogate. So I think from the perspective of having those three paths, it does become something that's influential in your decision making in this world as a woman, especially considering the climate. So I just was curious about that.
And I'm sure we, our egg donors, are doing education and discussion about these issues as well. But you don't have a categorical position saying you're only for known as opposed to unknown.
We're about to be only for known. Simply because, like she was saying, the anonymity is not, it doesn't exist anymore, so we can't really, exactly. We're also US-based, so while we support donors who are in other countries, there's not the legal
It's
ramifications.
not the donors, it's the IPs, once again, intended parents. So it's, if the IPs come here and have an egg donation under certain circumstances, it would affect their parental rights. And I hope I'm not misstating here, but I know for a fact that that is an issue. But this is another example of why it's not, we're not in the same easy position as you are, in the sense that it's multi-disciplines, multi-perspectives. Exactly. Exactly. It's called Considerations for Egg Donations, and it's happening tomorrow at 12 o'clock.
Well, we're also seeing more legislation moving towards mandating known as well. So, I mean, that is, I think, at the forefront of what's coming, certainly as people continue to evolve on that. Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah, this is the reality of the world that we live in. So, yeah, absolutely.
we just, with We Are Egg Donors, we actually were just working with the state legislature in Colorado because there was a donor-conceived persons bill. And working with them to kind of edit it to make sure that it also protects the donor. And one of those things is that the donor-conceived person has access to certain information. The donor did not have the same access. So for those donors who were originally anonymous, we don't always have access to what the live birth situation is. What happens to the embryos? Who do those kids become? And it's not so much an open relationship necessarily, it's open access. Exactly. And I think that that's what, as we are egg donors, that's what we advocate for, is that donors have access to the information about the donor conceived children that they are part of. Not that they have the relationship with them, but that they're able to access that information, because a lot of donors don't have anything. I mean, we have had donors who wake up from their egg retrieval and the clinics are not even, they won't even tell them how many eggs they got. And that's just not acceptable, in my opinion. They have a right to know what's happening with their own body and what is going on and what they're going to be DNA connected to. That, again, does not specify that they need to have a relationship with the IPs or with the donor-conceived child, but they should have access to information as to whether or not there is a donor-conceived child. And how many?
Once again, perspectives, disciplines. So mental health, legal, medical, they're all, not necessarily the same. They're all different rays of light on this. So the legal opinion might not be the same as the medical or the mental health professional, and the perspective of the egg donors, the donor-conceived children, the intended parents, the service providers are also not all the same perspective. But you need all these voices and all these disciplines to get a fuller picture, and that's what we're trying to do. Yes, Amira.
And that's, I will say that as We Are Egg Donors, like with this donor-conceived person bill in Colorado, one of the stances that we take is exactly that like there is no, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm distracted by the noise out there. But no, we're on the same page with that. That we do not believe that getting rid of anonymous donors is going to have any effect on the amount of donors or the quality of the donors. Like, absolutely not. That if it stays or if it goes, it's not going to change.
As I said, it's something that evolves, and we're an organization that for this particular topic hasn't decided to lead. We were asked to support the Colorado bill, and we decided not to. or we decided not to bring it even to a further conversation at this point, because as I said, we believe that people have different perspectives here, and I personally think that it's a matter of evolution, and our unique perspective here is not the most important perspective right now. I think it's the egg donors, it's the donor-conceived children, etc. But doesn't mean that we won't make a determination. But for now, transparency, education, we still say the same things. We just, at this point, didn't think that there needs to be a legislation that states, that prohibits a level of anonymity, at least not legally. But to tell you that I read every single word of the bill, I can't even say that. So, I think maybe we already have a party next door. So I want to thank you so much for coming and listening. As I said, even if you have already a job and you can't be our advocacy person, we want you to be involved. And we'll talk about it over the weekend. I mean, for instance, Resolve has an action page that would allow you, for instance, to voice your support of the bill that's coming up to the Appropriation Committee soon, and needs to pass that for the IVF mandate in California to become inclusive of same-sex couples. So you'll get an email from us soon about that. So stay involved. We'll have briefings that are done in the form of a webinar to the professional community as well. And we had one about surrogacy post Roe v. Wade, just days before the leaked document. And no, I did not leak it myself. But we're going to have another very interesting one soon, so stay tuned. I'm not going to reveal it yet. Since guess what? We want to hear what the advisory board says about it. So that's an example of how we operate. So thank you so much. I want to thank EMD Cyrano for sponsoring this evening. You see, we have sponsors. And they are also sponsoring the happy hour. You're going to hear from them in a minute. We're also going to make some logistical announcements there. So please join us next door, and see you tomorrow.